Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Terry Wager with Generator Consulting. And as you can see, someone in the studio with me is not as ugly as Doug. It's my partner, Christine McGinley of Generator Consulting. And it's because Doug decided to be in a hurricane today instead of online with us. And so we are going to be talking not
I don't know if it was so much of a decision, Terry, as the world said Houston doesn't and its neighboring areas don't get internet.
I'm fairly certain Doug decided he wanted to be in a hurricane, so he moved there years and years ago to be in a hurricane yesterday. But anyway, Doug can't be here today because he's evidently without power, and that's unfortunate. So all our prayers and thoughts are with all of those people going through that, and we hope a speedy recovery for all of that area. And we are here representing the Organizational Health Collective, which is a group of consultants who are really focused on helping organizations become healthier as a community, working together on the healthy side of business, because so many businesses focus on the smart side of business. And we believe that when you focus on the healthy, the smart kind of takes care of itself a little bit, or it's much easier to put in the processes, systems when people are working together well. And so that's what Organizational Health Collective is all about. We're a group of, I keep wanting to say psychologists, not everybody's a psychologist, I am, but it's a group of consultants working towards helping organizations become healthier. And if you want to join, please, by all means, jump in, talk to Doug on LinkedIn and find out how to be a part of it. And if you want to talk to us, of course, just reach out, Generator Consulting. Exactly. And today we were going to talk about, Doug and I were going to talk about, why did we fail to execute? And Christine and I are going to save that topic for when Doug comes back, because he was really excited to talk about that. And what we're going to talk about is, what are we talking about?
I think we decided, how do we set up for that conversation of, if we agreed, then why did we fail to execute?
Absolutely.
So one of our mentors as a collective is Patrick Lencioni, and he, as you know, has the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team as one of his best-selling books. And the foundation of that is the idea of vulnerability trust. And so Terry and I were releasing little articles, blogs, insights on Mondays as Generator. And so we thought we would focus on that foundational piece of building trust. Is that a good way to say it, Terry?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the reality is Christine and I always focus on human performance in the idea of emotional mastery or emotional intelligence, really understanding that our productivity, our performance, and how we do as people is all related to how we are aligning emotion and mind.
Can I back up one more?
Absolutely.
That it's much more out in the world that it's emotional intelligence. And so that's kind of we discovered working with our mentors and different things, that's kind of the what that Goldman has put out there and made popular. And we totally value all that work. But what Terry has mastered is more of what drives that. How's the how to be better at emotional intelligence? Is that kind of how to say it, Terry?
Absolutely. I think that's a good way to put it. Is emotional intelligence is the what, and we want to think about the idea of self-awareness and self-regulation and empathy and social skills and all of those things, as well as motivation, of course. But those are the things that are talked about in emotional intelligence. And one of the things that I've found in my whole career is, whenever we start talking about emotion, we always, because it's so intangible, we move back to behavior. And so we end up really focusing too much on behavior and not enough on how to actually master the emotions. And so, we want to master our emotions. Let's do social skills. We want to master emotions. Let's uh, try to put ourselves in other people's shoes. That's a behavior. We want to become aware of ourselves. Let's do mindfulness training. All of those things are great things to do. I'm not against any of it, but it does not actually help people to understand how to identify emotions or separate them from the behaviors that we do. And so I'm very, very
So
strong advocate of identifying emotion and separating it from the behavior we do.
so how did you kind of, God, I always want to unpack so much because you've packed so much in. So I won't, but I do want to say the
Please do.
difference between like the idea of the emotions versus behaviors. Can you just tell me a little bit, very top line, how it's why they call it emotional intelligence, even though it's like behavioral intelligence?
Yeah, I think Daniel Goldman, the way he writes and what he talks about in emotional intelligence is absolutely brilliant. And it's true that our emotions are the piece or the missing piece to performance, to connection, to relation, because we really do connect emotionally. When I talk about my emotions or I share from an emotional standpoint, people gravitate towards me. But if I talk about from a behavioral standpoint, it actually either causes us to think too much or try to figure out what people are saying instead of go, oh, I get it. And so that's one of the biggest ways you can tell emotion from behaviors. If people are starting to think too much, they got into a behavior conversation. If
I,
they're just like, oh, truth, that's it, you got it, that's an emotional conversation. And
I think this is, as you're talking, like where I see it kind of applying is an old chart where it was manager versus leader, and they
mhm,
talked about becoming a leader was more of like sharing. Like, is that the connecting versus the, like, let me contrast the management is the telling. And to me, it's telling the behavior rather than sharing the connection. Can you jump into that? I know I've never
yeah,
asked you to do that, so I'm here to student
absolutely,
too.
absolutely. And there's a book that I love, and it's part of my recovery repertoire called A New Pair of Glasses. And he actually talks about telling versus sharing when he was interacting with his kid. Um, and he basically said, I used to tell Richard everything, and I never realized that I wasn't sharing with him. And he couldn't hear me because I was telling him. But when I started to share with him, he started to share back with me. And the whole idea is telling is a very cognitive thing. And so I'm telling people, and in fact, it might even seem that I'm telling people right here on this call that this is the idea that you got to have. Well, nobody has to have it. But when I'm telling people about what I think and what I believe, it's an opinion. But when I'm sharing my experience, one, it's my emotional experience, and two, it's more of my point of view. And I actually had a conversation on a Thursday live stream that I do about the idea of opinion versus point of view. And a point of view is much more of an emotional connection with people, and it's the why I believe what I believe rather than just spouting off things that I think. And so it's a very cognitive idea when I'm telling people stuff. But when I'm talking about my experience, I'm coming from an emotional place where I felt something that's implored me to see things in a different way.
And so that's a place of being vulnerable a little bit too,
Absolutely.
because you're sharing how, like, I know we were talking a lot about our clients being frustrated as well as ourselves at times,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
how that can, we start thinking about all the things that we can do rather than the idea of faith in what we are doing and in ourselves. That
Absolutely.
internal vulnerability of not everything's lining up
Yeah.
the way our logic says it should.
Right. We we were
Oh,
talking about this yesterday. Christine and I were talking about this idea of frustration being logicking something and trying to make it work rather than living in the spirit of faith that things are going to work if we just take the next right step. And so one idea of that is, and getting frustrated, frustration happens when we're trying to make something happen of our own accord instead of living more in that space of, okay, what's next and how do I show up and how do and I can't get to that space if I'm protecting myself and if I'm trying to think it through in my ego or in my protection. But when I'm allowing myself to just be, okay, this is where we're at, what's next, it almost seems like we're muddling through, blind leading the blind kind of thing, or taking steps without knowing where to step. But the reality is that's much more in line with faith. And faith doesn't necessarily, I when I'm talking about faith, it's faith in the process that if we do these things, things will happen. And I also am very spiritual. It's not, and I have my own understanding of what a higher power is and what the source of my life is. And I don't necessarily put that on anybody, but I firmly believe that when I believe my higher powers got me so I can go help other people, I'm taken care of. And so I just need to do the next right thing. And I don't know who the next right person to help is. And so I have to kind of be open and vulnerable to what's happening in the world in order to be open to the opportunity to help someone else. And it goes back to, I think the reason I'm talking about this is because I think a lot of times we fail to execute because we're so focused on a plan and we're focused on our logic and we're focused on what we think should happen and what we think the goal should be, that we close ourselves off from opportunity and we close ourselves off from the other people who are sharing what's going on with them.
I completely agree. But I think it's everybody has a little different journey that they're on. So to
Absolutely.
me and my personality and where it falls in, and yes, we are a couple. I almost feel like my fingers are going in his room. Uh, the idea of a plan still is important. Like think about going on a vacation. You still need to coordinate all those points, but you're staying flexible in that plan. Like if you're
Absolutely.
so rigid in like what you were talking about, but there's also the side of, well, I'll just manifest everything. Like it's manifest action in generators world, but it's also how are you? I saw a little, we're in an emotional intelligence group on LinkedIn, and there's a gal that's always got these intricate posts and different things, and it was 7 ways you need rest for resilience in your business. And I was like, 7 ways of resting? Well, that's great. Know what refuels you. But I was like, I have too much to do to even read your 7 ways. Maybe another time I'll save that one and probably never get back to it
Absolutely.
because I am ready to move on to the next thing, or what speaks to me in my business, or how can I excel at what I'm doing, what fuels me. And that might be the plan. And Terry has this, okay, let's take the spiritual and guide us. And I think that's why it's good to have coaches and teammates, because we all have different strengths.
Absolutely. And I
And that
think,
comes down to being able to have manage relationships, which is the emotional intelligence social piece.
yeah, and I think that you make a good point because if you're living by faith without a plan, well, that could look like a balloon kind of going anywhere in the world. And if you're living with a plan without faith, it could be very, very rigid in its own way. And so one has no rigidity whatsoever, and it's just everywhere, and hopefully it works out.
Free
And
spirit.
the free spirit, and we've known a few of those, and they kind of float away, and we're like, we don't even know where half of them are now. But where did that free spirit go? But the other is that rigidity of dominating, where we're trying to control everything. And what we have to realize is that there's this idea of understanding what we can control, what we can't control. And so working within the idea of being vulnerable, embracing the fact that there is fear in our lives, and there is problems in our lives, and then there is things that aren't working the way we want them to, and being able to examine those. At the same time, being able to identify that emotion and identify where we're triggered, and allowing ourselves to be in balance, knowing that there is something that we're supposed to be doing, knowing that there is some direction to go. We can take that next right step. We can create a plan all we want. We just can't be so rigid in it that we don't have the flexibility. And that's one of
So,
the things.
so what I just heard there, and is the idea of the have your plan,
Absolutely.
but when you get that frustration or that being overwhelmed, or am I in the right space, to slow down for a moment and identify your emotions.
Absolutely. And this
Like
is where
what, like
emotional mastery comes in.
speaking it out into existence. Okay, this is why I'm frustrated. What emotions, or how are the emotions playing out?
Right. And
Which might be, summarize that for me.
this is where we're really talking about emotional mastery, because I may understand the idea that there's emotion and there's this, that going on, and and I can have some social skills so I don't yell at somebody or something like that. But that doesn't mean that I've really mastered my emotional experience, and I may be spending too much time trying to behaviorally control myself instead of
Mm.
being aware and identifying my emotions, which some people might, when they talk about mindfulness, a lot of people think that's just simply meditation, and then I get mindful and I understand my breath and I do all of this. But if I'm not identifying my emotions, if I'm not identifying what tweaked me out, how I'm feeling hurt, how I'm feeling invalidated, how I'm feeling inferior, how I'm feeling powerless, if I'm not identifying that, then there is no plan on how to get out of that. I just and then I get it fixed, right? But I don't get fixed. I got to identify that stuff and let it go,
Well,
and
I
then
think
move into.
that's the concept that we refer to as stuffing it. And
Absolutely.
then it
There's
blasts it. I'm just going to avoid, I'm going to stuff the emotion that
right.
there's something going on with me, but I'll just go back to deep breaths.
Deep breaths, and then do the same rigid stuff I was doing before, and hopefully it's going to work this time. And so we live in this hopeful mindset of, if I just try harder, I'm going to get it. And that's very ambitious, but if I just try harder, I'm going to get it. Sooner or later we quit. And so it's really just putting off quitting until we can't handle it anymore, and then we quit. And that's honestly why I think a lot of people in the pandemic era and 21, 22 quit their jobs, is because they've been putting off and putting off and putting off and trying to mindset their world, instead of master their emotions by being able to identify what's going on. And I think there was a lot of fear in the world that people weren't actually admitting and really dealing with by looking at it. And so what they did, instead of look at where they're at and stay there and see what they were getting out of it, they decided to upend their world and quit and change. And some people were, hey, that's a great idea. And then the rest of them all became coaches. And so I think that, and then all these scared people coaching each other. And it's like, that's crazy. And then a lot of those people went back to something what they were doing before the pandemic now. And we've seen a lot of return to work and a lot of return to what I was doing before. And it's like, whoa, oh, back. And what happened was they had an emotional explosion inside that they weren't identifying. They don't know how to identify, maybe. And they just tried to think logically and get themselves back into, this is a pattern or a routine that I'm okay with. This is a habit I'm okay with, that isn't identifying emotion or anything, and they're not necessarily tapping into the ability that we have to be resilient because they're not identifying their emotions. They're stacking them or they're stuffing them. And so if we stack them, we become overwhelmed. If we stuff them, we become a volcano.
Yeah, I think the idea of like stacking all the things, especially as like business owners, you're responsible for the things. I mean, the CEO is kind of coordinating their team, but they're still ultimately the one that the stakeholders could fire,
Absolutely.
because they're managing everyone. And so it's so important for the leader to have that awareness and being able to have the skill of just going through and identifying their emotions, so they can get back on track, so they can identify, what emotional state they're in, or what their team members' emotional states are in, or how can they provide the support that's needed and rally the team to achieve it together. And
Absolutely.
and maybe even saying, going back to the vulnerability of, I don't have the answer, but let's figure it out together.
Absolutely. And
And
one of the things you just said, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
One of the things
I'm
you were
here to
just
trigger ideas.
yeah, one of the things you were just talking about is this idea of emotional intelligence is empathy, talking about building empathy. And then we talk about emotional mastery, tactical empathy, and that's using empathy to move forward the relationship or the event or the progress that we're looking for in our performance. And the difference, the way I see the difference is when we're talking about understanding empathy is, okay, I understand you have emotions. And I understand you have emotions. I understand what it's like to be in
Because
your
we're all
shoes,
human.
so to speak. What?
Because we're all human.
Because we're all human. And so I get it, but I haven't identified the emotions that you're experiencing in the moment that you're upset. What I've experienced is you're upset and you're angry and you're this and you're avoiding me, or you're not talking, or you're trying too hard, but I don't necessarily know what you're feeling because I'm doing the empathy thing going, okay, well, I know she's having emotion, but honestly, that's as far as it goes. Tactical empathy is going, okay, she's trying really hard. I wonder if she's feeling powerless. I wonder if she's feeling inferior. I wonder if she's feeling pressured. And then being able to say, hey, I wonder if you're feeling pressured. I wonder if you're feeling. Now, what I did is I just went from, okay, she's having emotions. I'll back off. Empathy, understanding. Hey, we all have days, right? We all just a day. But no, now I'm actually going, wow, I see what's going on. And when I'm having that, I'm feeling powerless. I'm feeling pressured. I wonder if you're feeling that way and I can support you in some way. And what I just did is I brought it from the, oh, don't get it on me, where I could see it, but I'm not actually engaging it, to engaging it and saying, okay, how can I actually alleviate some of that, be a secure base for you to be able to talk about that, and then us together move forward instead of either getting mired in it going, oh my God, she's having this, now I'm having this, or going, she's having this, I'm going to let her have her day. We can't do those two things. We have to connect emotionally. And when leaders connect emotionally and go, wow, it looks like you're feeling overwhelmed, it looks like you're feeling pressured, I want to be able to help you. How can I serve you as a leader so that we can move forward together towards our initiative, whatever that is? That's where we start to really become more flexible. That's where we become leaders instead of being a manager, or instead of being a figurehead, being, inspiring by saying, hey, you can handle it, I'm going to go. No, we got to be connected to the other people. And it's funny because we have a friend who actually worked for a company. I won't say the company, but a couple of days ago, she messaged Christine saying, have you guys move forward on this project, because she wants to be a part of it. And then I don't know if Christine had time to answer her or not, but then like the very next day she messaged me And then she talked about how the business that she was working at actually wasn't connecting with her or listening to her emotional experience of what was going on. And she was feeling pressured and she was feeling attacked and she was feeling like it was all on her shoulders. And she didn't even own the business, but she had about 5 hats on. And the funny thing is all of those hats, some of them the owner's supposed to wear, but they're like 1,000 pounds each. And so they said, go ahead, you wear them. And we don't have to. And they're abdicating. And so she's, feeling heavier and heavier and heavier. And she's kind of short. So if she gets any lower down, she's not going to be able to actually walk. And so it's like, that's a lot of weight for a small person. We got to alleviate. And we alleviate by identifying the emotion and seeing how we can actually come alongside and help.
I think that just ties back into what you were sharing earlier about stacking the books. Like each one of those is like way down, way down, way down. And if you're not like, I need help with this book, who can help me? Or just identifying it and like prioritizing, is that the important thing right now? I think that's one of the things of the performance management. If all we're doing is like, okay, I'm taking all of these books and like weighing down, like, how can I take one and release them? And I know that's the
May I have
same
another?
idea. It could be all the priorities. It could be all the hats weighing you down. It could be the emotions weighing you down. Like, how do you pick one off and like one at a time? I think that's
Well, and
like
that's
that's where you become the higher performer.
absolutely. And the funny thing is every one of those that you're picking is because you're not identifying the emotion. So yeah, I'll take another hat. I'll take another hat. I'll take another hat. Well, are you overwhelmed? I'm not going to admit that. I'm just going to carry it. And yeah, I'm feeling pressure. Yeah, I'm feeling inferior. Yeah, I'm feeling all this stuff, but I'm not going to admit that to myself or anybody else because I don't want them to think I suck. Oh, and now I'm having a conversation in my head, afraid that they think I'm suck. So I'm taking on more instead of going, hey, here's where I'm at with this. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm frightened of. I'm frightened that if I tell you it's too much, you're going to think poorly of me. That's a conversation. And I don't think we have enough of those conversations. And, I think that any business owner that was listening to somebody with a real statement of, hey, I'm feeling really good about this. I'm feeling good about this. I'm feeling really, really pressured with this piece. I'm feeling completely inferior because I don't know what to do about that piece.
Red, yellow, green.
Red, yellow, green in the emotional states. This is where I'm at. Every business owner that is emotionally attuned to themselves is going to be able to respond to that in a very healthy way and help or hire or bring in or renegotiate what work needs to be done in a priority sense. But the problem is we don't have those conversations. And there's a few people out there that need a little bit more mastery in their emotional intelligence. And they need a lot less mindset and more focus on what's going on with me so that I can be honest about that so that we can actually perform together better. And there's all kinds of sayings that, oh, we're better together. Yeah, but 10 people focusing on mindset is not alignment.
Well, I think that goes back to, I know it's like wrap up time, but that's the organizational, reset, organizational health collective concept. Of many of them work in companies that are trying to establish, more organizational health, more people focused, people driven ideas. That's that smart side of that healthy side of business, as well as there's people that work on smaller teams. Like we're a little bit of a smaller team, but there's people that are solopreneurs. So the idea of like a collective, whether it's the church, whether it's your, mom's group or your C-suite executives or a mastermind. I think it's the idea of the collective. So they're checking in with each other as well, because you can check in with yourself, which is phenomenal. But having somebody to be with you to kind of move you through the process, I think is super helpful. What are your closing thoughts, Terry?
That's the big thing is if you are one of these business owners or somebody who's interested in helping businesses, become more healthier, focusing on mindset is a great start. But then we want to move towards emotional intelligence. But then we want to take a step deeper and become more vulnerable and do our own work around what are the emotions we're feeling, what are the emotions we're experiencing. And by the way, anger, sadness, not emotions. And so we got to get clear on that. And we got to really get to what the experience, emotional experience is, and be able to identify that so we can let it go. And then be able to really focus on how we work together to really connect with each other on that deeper level. And then when we get into the meetings and we get into the conflict, we can really have a trust that wasn't there before, and we can get clear of a lot of the different problems way faster. And we talk about slowing down to go fast a lot. And the whole idea of slowing down to go fast is slowing down with myself and really have a healthy understanding of what's going on with me, so I can share it with the group, not just try to control it, but to share, hey, this is what's going on with me right now. I'm feeling a little inferior. I'm feeling a little stupid. I'm feeling a little powerless. And I need some help doing this or doing that or whatever it is, so that we can move forward. Or being in, admit, I really don't understand what you're talking about right now. Help me to understand. And when we can go from a place of understanding people or asking for more understanding, rather than trying to pretend we all got it and pretend we know what's happening, that's where we start to really perform at a higher level. And so that's, I think, the big thing is we want to move from just mindset to really getting into emotion set and really focusing on how we can share with each other instead of tell everybody what we think. And that's where I'm coming from. So that's it. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me on.